Hey everybody, it's Eric from EPautos.com, your libertarian car guy. Wanted to talk briefly today about something that Trump could do tomorrow to dramatically reduce the cost of driving by increasing the gas mileage that your vehicle gets. Now let me set the stage for this. I think it's very interesting that for the past 50 years, the government has been telling us how much it's saving us by imposing federal fuel efficiency requirements, irrespective of how much it costs to comply with that, which if you follow my stuff, you'll already know a whole lot about. Now, related to that is the fact that the federal government has also, for the past 40 years, been requiring that gasoline be adulterated with what are called oxygenants, chiefly ethanol alcohol, though there are other oxygenants. And the reason for that, so they said, was to reduce tailpipe exhaust emissions, even if it did mean a reduction in gas mileage, which it inevitably did, because what happens when you decrease the BTU content of a gallon of gasoline by adulterating it with, say, 10% ethanol alcohol? Well, your mileage goes down by about 5%. Now, back in the day when they first began doing this, and back in the day was the mid-late 1970s, the justification was that this was necessary because, again, it was a way to reduce exhaust emissions, and the take-home point there is that this was possible, or at least it occurred, because the engines of that era were generally carbureted. And a carburetor is a mechanical fuel delivery device, and it generally cannot adjust its air-fuel ratio, which is adjusted mechanically via turning in or out screws that increase or decrease the richness or the leanness of the fuel mixture, or by changing what are called jets, which are essentially just orifices of a certain diameter. And if you have a larger diameter orifice, it's a richer jet, flows more fuel, and burns more gas. Now the idea was, if we lean out the fuel mixture, we'll effectively be doing the same as leaning out the carburetor. And so it was clunky and clumsy, but there was some truth to it. But here's the thing. Beginning in the mid-1980s and by the end of the 80s, all vehicles sold in this country came standard with electronic fuel injection rather than carburetors. And the thing about electronic fuel injection is that it self-adjusts. It can continually alter the air-fuel ratio according to various parameters. If it senses a lean fuel mixture, well, it'll richen up the air-fuel mixture. So, think about that. What it means is that if you feed an engine that's fuel injected a lean fuel mixture, it will compensate by enriching the fuel mixture. So the net effect of that is that you end up burning more gas, and you do not reduce exhaust emissions. And that's double so with regard to modern fuel injected engines, because they're already essentially zero emissions vehicles, or zero emissions engines, in that they do not produce any meaningfully harmful byproducts any longer that cause air pollution. You know, we're down to the point of angels dancing on the heads of a pin differences, even though the public isn't generally told that. It's not explained to them. You'll hear talk about how, well, the latest federal emissions control proposal will reduce exhaust gas emissions by 50%, which sounds like a really big number, and it would be if we were talking about whole numbers. But in fact, we're talking about 50% of a fraction of a percent, which ends up being essentially meaningless in terms of any real effect on the quality of the air. Anyway, the long and short of it is, why do we still have these oxygenated fuels requirements? Why are we still adulterating the gas with other things, such as ethanol? Since there is no advantage in terms of reducing emissions, and there is a big disadvantage in terms of fuel economy. You can test this for yourself. Take your vehicle and fill up the tank, and then drive it until it's empty, and note how many miles per gallon you got. And of course, use E10 pump gas. You know, E10 being 10% ethanol. Then find a station in your area that sells ethanol-free gas, 100% gasoline. You can find this in most areas of the country. Fill up your tank and then drive it and note what your mileage is. And you'll probably notice that you have gotten 3 to 5% better gas mileage. And that's not a small thing. when you factor it out over the course of years. Anyway, I'm wondering why Trump doesn't simply decree via executive order that the oxygenated fuels requirement is henceforth null and void, and the refiners can go back to selling us real gas again. Well, if you want to know the answer to that question, it's because the agribusiness lobby is immensely powerful, and they have a lot of money, and they can use that money to influence who gets nominated for an office, and that ends up being who ends up getting elected. And it's very, very difficult to do anything that might be considered a financial threat to those interests. And that's why 40 years after electronic fuel injection became standard in everything, we're still forced to pay for this ethanol or oxygenated adulterated fuel that causes our vehicles to go less far on a gallon of that fuel. Thought you might be interested in that. More up at EPautos.com, the web's best libertarian gearhead site. I'll also be posting my latest interview with Brian Hyde, and I will be on KMED-FM tomorrow with Bill Meyer for the Wheels Up segment, and it looks like I'm going to be on David Knight's show on Friday. So if you're interested in that, I hope you'll stop by and tune in, and I hope you'll swing by EP Autos to check out whatever else is there, and let me know how I'm doing, and send me any ideas for columns you might like me to write about, and I will be happy to look into it. Thanks as always, and we'll catch up with you again soon.